Hey everyone, welcome to Flywheelpod, your number one source for everything Frax, DeFi, and everything in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, you've come to the right place. This is DeFi Dave, here with capital K. We're here to help you harness the power of the flywheel. And something that was mentioned over and over again was the flywheel, multiple flywheels that Redacted is creating with 0xSami. This is actually one of my favorite episodes, and I feel like we're getting better every week, but Sami is truly one of those builders in the trenches, day in, day out, and he was really giving us a lot of insight on how he sees the space, where he sees DeFi and real yield going, and not just at the application level, but at the consensus level. And, what's it like to just be a builder, even in the darkest of times? What did you think, Kiet?
I mean, I'm like I said in the pod, I've met Sami pre-redacted, so it was just like amazing to see what he has built, and he keeps on impressing me with the more innovative shit. Because when he first told me about Redacted, this was like before the curve wars, and it was kind of like before truly seeing all this meta governance fight out, right? And I was like, damn, he had the vision to see what it could look like, built a product for it, then built even more derivatives of that product. And as the readers or listeners are going to hear later in the pod, he's just going to keep on going deeper and deeper.
Yeah. And I really appreciated how he professed this positive sum mindset when building and when thinking about Redacted and how it fits into the wider DeFi landscape and how they can work with other protocols. Like, he's definitely one of the better positive sum builders in the space with that mindset.
Facts.
Yeah. And on that note, we'll get this started. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that bell button for those notifications. You can follow us on Twitter at Flywheelpod, Telegram at Flywheelpod, join our group. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFi Dave 22.
And you can follow me at 0x_K.
And let's get the flywheel rolling. All right. Welcome to Flywheelpod. This week, we're very excited to have to finally have the founder of Redacted, founder of New Order Cartel, degen extraordinaire, 0xSami. How's it going?
What's up, guys? What's up? Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming. Really excited to have you. Been hearing about Redacted since the end of last year, especially towards the end of the whole Olympus cycle craze. And I was looking into your background a bit, and just to get things started, you were doing research before for different L1s. You were doing research for Missouri. How did you make the jump between doing research and building? Because they're two very different things. And what are some of the things that you didn't expect when you got into building?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, this is kind of all I've been doing, right? Like, even in school, I went to school like for blockchain in Toronto. Um, and I guess like a good way for like a lot of people to just get started doing something like serious in the space is through the research route, right? So for me, that was kind of just like the natural way to head down. But the thing about research is that you're so out of the loop, actually, right? Like, the research is that one job where you have to be in the loop, but because you're just sort of in the sidelines watching and just having to follow along with what is going on, you're one step behind the builders, right? And like when I got into the space, like I really wanted to just be involved, right? And I noticed that people who were on the building side were always like one step ahead, had more creative freedom, all that sort of stuff. Were the ones who were able to like give the researchers something to research about, right? So for me, like I felt like I wanted to head down that route more than be on the VC side or anything like that.
That
Yeah,
makes a
and
lot of
so
sense.
yeah, you go ahead,
Yeah,
Kiet.
I was gonna say real quick before we get deeper. I actually met Sami back in uh, November last year in Lisboa, in Portugal, actually. And this was like pre-redacted, and as he was like sharing the early days of redacted vision with me, I was like, wow, this is a truly DeFi degen who sees a need in the space and is setting out to build it and fill the gap. And kind of seeing where Redacted is today, man, I just want to give a moment and say I'm hella proud of what you have built, Sami. Claps.
I appreciate that, bro. It's actually crazy, eh? Like
Fucking
you were one of
crazy.
like the first people to ever hear about the idea. Actually, you were like there. I won't say like who introduced us, but like you were
Yeah.
there, like sort of like in the early days of just like forming the when we were initially forming the idea. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, and it's truly a DeFi native idea. It's this layer on top of, convex and curve and just, a how can I say that's like like kind of like a like I'm trying to think. Sorry. Um an index for governance. That was the word. An index for governance. Did you
hmm
get the idea from like from your research? Like how did you think of it?
I think like the easiest answer would be that, but I think like another way of putting it is like when I said like I really wanted to just like be involved and do something that like really got me out of bed in the morning. Like I think like stuff down the DeFi rabbit hole is what excites me, right? And like people say like different things about when you like get super meta into like DeFi and stuff, but the truth is like not all of us who want to like build and continue innovating can like focus on mass adoption stuff, right? Like you have like a 1% chance at like, building like $1 trillion network or something, but like it's much more reasonable and obtainable to start humble, start with what you know, and then slowly work your way down the supply chain to a point where you can continue to grow your user base, right? Like it always makes sense to me at least to like start with like a very niche crowd and then slowly expand your way out rather than the other way around, right? I feel like everyone or not everyone, but I feel like a lot of projects like try and start by saying like we're the DEX for we're the DEX that's going to bring in like mass adoption, and then over time you slowly start to see them become sort of like what Redacted is now. Like you start to see them like hone in into one specific niche that was working out for them, and then like that's just the name of the game, right? Like the cycle, like that's kind of like how a lot of DeFi apps went, right? I think like if this is the Frax pod, like like the Frax is like a great example, like I think like it started off as like a stable coin, like a yield vehicle for like a lot of like DeFi native people, and then now you start to see them like branch out into multiple different things and expand their user base, right? I feel like that's like the better route to head than like just trying to go head on mass adoption. So that's kind of like the mindset I had.
Yeah, getting into the redacted suite of products because there's a lot of them. You have like the main redacted protocol, which is the index itself, and like giving butterfly holders kind of power and control and governance. You have hidden hand, which is your vote incentive bribe platform. You guys have Pyrex, which is like a futures market but for voting, and then you guys have Dinero, which is to be announced. So can you give like a little bit of a description of like each thing?
Yeah. So we started off with the protocol itself, right? Which I think is a relatively easy concept. We launched the project as sort of in this hyper bootstrapping phase to get us in a position where we have the runway and the team and the treasury to do the things we want. Where sort of we fair launched the butterfly token by letting people bring in assets that we thought were strategic, right? Um, Similar to the old model. Um, Once we sort of reached that point where we were happy with the treasury and the way the token was distributed, we moved into V2, which was a change to tokenomics, and then the launch of the two um, flagship flagship dApps, essentially, right? So Hidden Hand is the one more people are familiar with, I think, because it's been around longer. Hidden Hand is, essentially like a general purpose vote incentive platform, right? The way we like to think of it is we've been calling it VEV recently, like voter extractable value. A lot of tokens nowadays, like like have no utility or like reason to hold them or any of these things, right? But when you can start to introduce um, liquidity directional power to these tokens, right? Or influence to these tokens, then all of a sudden you open up like the door for like a whole bunch of things that people could start to do with them. And Hidden Hand like enables exactly that. So we're integrated with Balancer, Frax, obviously, Ribbon, and we're starting to put out one every 2 weeks now for like different DeFi protocols on different chains. And yeah, I'd say that's like a good description of like Hidden Hand. And then Pyrex is sort of like, its brother. Uh, Pyrex is, to make it simple for people, like it's a mix of what people would consider something like element, or yield, sort of these principal token yield tokens, combined with an auto compounder, like a liquid locker, like Lido or something, right? Um, that started with Convex, and the idea is that people can lock their Convex with us. We give them a liquid representation of that lock, and they can then sell the future yield or the future governance power of their underlying CVX tokens, all through the Pyrex app. So it's like a liquid locker on steroids. um, and obviously they go hand in hand with each other, right? Because you could launch like the hidden hand market for a token, and then pair it with the Pyrex launch, which auto compounds the rewards and enables like leverage and all that sort of stuff for yeah.
Cool, cool. And any hints on Dinero? Or is that still under wraps?
Yeah, Dinero is still under wraps for sure. I'd say like the thing with Dinero is that like um, we're confident with its development and the way it's been progressing, but the problem is that it doesn't work on a technical level until the Shanghai fork.
Mm.
So like like there's no point talking about it now because like I want to talk about it so bad, but like the problem is it doesn't make sense to talk about it now, just like front running issues and shit like that, right? But Dinero is going to be like I just mentioned on this call, like slowly just like going from like really niche crowds to just like slowly expanding and tapping into new user bases and stuff. And Dinero is really that, right? Because the goal is to while like we've been putting out these applications which focus a lot on like VEV, like I said, right? Like getting the most out of governance. I think like we can take that same mentality and move it down from the application layer directly into the consensus layer. And instead of fighting over governance of different tokens, we can fight over block space of the Ethereum mainnet. So that's kind of the goal of Dinero, but I won't say like how it works or anything like that.
It sounds real interesting.
Oh,
Kids,
cool. So,
your face right there says it all. We can
oh,
only
like
speculate.
I'm salivating. I'm salivating right now. Just hearing all of this coming out. But I actually, you brought up one thing about the true value of governance is the revenue you can extract out of it. And you obviously kind of coined the term VEV. Like, could you explain a little bit to the folks back home, like what you mean by that saying?
Totally. So like we all know, right? Like the turnout for governance is really low, and even more than that, like the concept of governance, in terms of maintaining the protocol is pretty flawed, right? Like, one thing we strive for internally is reaching a state of like immutability, right? Like, hopefully by this time next year, all our smart contracts are frozen. The contract just exists, and we're just this like engine that other dApps can plug into, right? Um, but I think like a lot of projects right now like have this over dependence on governance, which is all like truly it's just smoke and mirrors, right? Um, it's just the core team making decisions, and then the token holders just voting yes, and then they just implement it, right? Even if they didn't vote yes, it's all off chain anyway, so they can just change it, right? So it's not something that's like uh, it's not something that's benefiting the users in any way by it being like quote unquote owned by the community, right? So when we look at governance, right, and I'd say like Redacted is governance tooling, like I think a lot of people like put us into like the own fork bucket or something like that, but I put us in the governance tooling bucket. But we just look at it from a different perspective, financialized governance tooling, right? The thing that people care about, right, and the way that you can make your protocol and token more useful is if you attach, the same way you make your protocol enable users to make money. If you can enable anything else to make money, then you just like make your protocol like more successful and tap into more users and stuff like that, right? So that's why I said that. I think that governance really is like a temporary solution, and the right way to look at it for like a lot of protocols is like how can you get the most out of it, right? How can you make money out of it, right? In the end of the day.
Yeah, so you really have like a deep look and insight into these governance systems. And, many people have said this before, governance is flawed. Even Vitalik said that he doesn't agree with one token, one vote governance. So I guess like what I'm trying to say is like, if you build a DeFi protocol, like, what alternative system would you use to one token, one governance? Because it sounds like you would use something else.
I honestly, dude, like, I think like I think like governance for liquidity direction is like it's like a great application of governance, right? Gauges, using the token to decide where emissions go, stuff like that. That way you can involve major stakeholders to sort of like participate in your governance, right? But that's really all people care about. You know, people don't
Mm-hmm.
care about um, or like people don't care about if you should do a treasury swap with another project. Like, of course you should do it. You know, like, why do we have to vote on this and stuff, right? If I was to like, redo everything, I would say that like, um, or if I was to launch a new project like in today's time, I would say like honestly the best route is to just go straight to immutability, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Liquidity, I think pioneered this in the DeFi space, and I think it's the best path. You know, like be confident in what you put out. Make sure that it's something that people can like easily build on top of. It's composable, and just like release it into the world and have your token be more of a value accrual mechanism than it is like a governance mechanism. I think that that's just like a more sustainable path and something that will like last longer or scale easier than like the route we're all taking right now.
So you're saying the best form of governance is actually no governance, and that it's just purely the protocol is immutable. It does what it does, and period. Like all you get are just shares
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the revenue. Like that is the best governance, really.
Well,
Huh.
the thing is that okay, why did people like fall in love with Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin, if worst comes to worst, like there is a way for Bitcoin to do forks and upgrade the system, right? But not like the thing is that people love Bitcoin for what it is, right? And you could say the same thing about Ethereum. People love Ethereum for what it is. You don't have to bug the user every single day by saying we're putting out a new governance vote and we're changing this and that. And then the people who learned about you last year don't know anything about what you're doing now. I mean, we have this problem right now, actually, right? Like, I think a lot of people know Redacted from when the bull market was like alive and well, but we've changed a lot, and that was through governance. And I think like, like a better path would just sort of be like releasing these products, releasing these protocols, having the parameters fixed, letting people get familiar with it over time, right? Instead of trying to like, constantly change and adapt and confuse users, and then like letting the protocol exist, right? I don't really see the need for like constantly changing parameters every single day.
Yeah, you mentioned that, people were super familiar with Redacted, especially when you guys launched at the end of last year in the whole Olympus like craze and whatnot. And now that you guys have changed a lot. So what has it like been to build between then and now? And like what kind of issues and communication issues are you trying to fix between then and now and like trying to get the word out like, hey, this is the new Redacted. This is what we've done since.
Yeah, yeah. So like I think we the thing with comms is that we always said it, right? Like we always said the goal was this was just like that like crazed phase was sort of just like a bootstrapping phase, right? And like the goal is always to put out like sustainable revenue drivers and like we said that from day one, right? But the thing is like people's attention in this space is like even mine, like people's attention is just like very short and I think like um this is just yeah, like it's hard to navigate comms in the space, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
people will sort of tune into you and what you're doing now, and they won't necessarily like follow along because of because of that governance issue, right? Like because things people constantly want to change things, and the system is always upgrading, and like all of DeFi today looks completely different than what it did like last year, right? Like I'd say like someone learned what like sushi was, like sushi is not the same as it was like last year. Trader Joe is changing to an order book, like everyone's just changing everything. And then, like, like I'd say like us, like, we're very deep into the space, like we can keep up with it. But I'd say like, when the bull market is active, you have a whole set of users that like can see you and identify you as one thing, but won't keep up the same way the hardcore users will, right? Um, so from a comms perspective, there's not like too much you can do other than just like constantly putting out integrations, doing stuff like this, um, the usual. I'd say like it's a nut that no one has really cracked yet.
Yeah, I would say like another Olympus fork um that did like a whole change up is Umami Finance, who we had on a few weeks ago. They started off as just like your standard home fork, this and that, and then they completely changed their model and their tokenomics and really rode the real yield wave. into today. And so like I feel like a lot of protocols have gone through this kind of growing up a bit, identity crisis a bit, and depending on like how they approach it, they either overcome it or they just wallow in inflation.
Yeah, yeah, umami is like a good example, I think, also, right? And I wouldn't say that like I necessarily like regret the way we launched. I would say like we actually wouldn't be able to do the things we're doing today if we didn't launch the way we launched, right? So I wouldn't say that it's something I regret. I'd say like we did that phase really well, and like we're doing our new era really well too. Um, uh, so I think like you sort of just have to take what you're given. You just have to be able to like sort of recognize it, right? I think there's a lot of old, yeah, like I'd say like Redacted and Umami are kind of like part of like the newer DeFi group.
Hmm.
Um, but there's projects that existed last year that have just like completely the urine forks, right? The urine forks are what I'm
Hmm.
trying to say, right? And
Hmm.
there's very few urine forks that sort of like made it out into being something unique. I think like Badger's a good example of like a project that did do that, right? Like Badger was a urine fork, but now they've sort of like come into their own identity of being this like Bitcoin native thing. They have all these different vaults. They've expanded out, et cetera, right? So there is like people we can look to from the past that was sort of in the same issue. But again, I think I think it's like too early to even like start thinking like that, right? Like for what it's
Hmm.
worth, even urine in the grand scheme of things is like a relatively new idea, right? So, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good point.
you're right. Like it is a relatively new idea, but it feels so long ago. It's such a juxtaposition.
Yeah, it feels so
Yeah.
boomer DeFi even one would say. But I love seeing
But
these
it's
protocols.
the same
Yeah.
thing, man. It's the same thing, dude. Like honestly, like the things that are like happening today are like the same problems that those projects were having when they first launched, I talk with like a bunch of these guys all the time, like the sushi type and alchemics and urine and people like might consider it boomer. In the end, like we're all gunning for like multi-billion-dollar valuations. It won't matter if you launched a year from now or a year ago. It won't really matter, right? But
Hmm.
they all have this exact same issue where like they fall into this trap of like trying to ride whatever is like hype and trying to get as much people's attention, and then realizing like it's more of a slow grind to become the chain links of the world, etc.
And it really takes time for a protocol to really glow up, and it takes a lot of iteration and trials. Like I feel like you said earlier, if Redacted had launched with a different mechanic where you didn't have treasury owned assets such as productive assets like Curve, Convex, and FXS, like I wouldn't think Hidden Hands or Pyrex would be as useful as it is today because you actually
Even
dog
worse, like
food.
you wouldn't
Yeah.
even worse, like you wouldn't even know what redacted was, right?
Yeah.
Which is like the hardest thing about being a builder, right? Is like you have to make like certain sacrifices in order to get your token out there, get it into people's heads, and like it is not the most like sustainable thing. But in the end of the day, like when you work in such a like hyper competitive market like this, like sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Yep.
Yeah,
And speaking of doing what you got to do, sorry, Dave, I just want to
you
double
go
click
ahead.
on this one thing because Redacted went through a pretty radical tokenomics change, right? So I wanted to hear from Sammy, what was the thinking process where you decided, hey, we have to do this, we have to take the bitter medicine. The community might have backlash. We kind of don't know what's on the other side, but we need to make a move. Could you walk us through that period of time?
Yeah, totally. So the rebase mechanic, right? Um, I think the rebase mechanic, looking back at it, works for a new protocol, right? But actually, like the same way that people gamed yield farming tokens or any of the like pool two tokens, any of these things, over time you start to see like the true light of how like these different tokenomic models can be manipulated and used against you as a protocol trying to grow, right? The issue with the rebase tokens, as an example, right, because that's what we had to pivot out of, um, was the bonding loops, right? um, People bonding different tokens to the treasury, um, and then like you launch a new bond and then they just sell that token and buy the new bond, and it actually puts you in not I won't say a death loop because I think like when you say the word death loop, you think of like UST or something like that, right? But it is like a slow death loop actually, right? The same way that you just stick to a pool two your entire life, like your protocol is not going to grow and like prosper, right? So for us, like it just wasn't working, right? Like it worked in the beginning, um, and instead of just like sitting on our hands and letting that play out the way we projected it to play out, I think like we made the decision to go to the community and say like, look, like um, we have these two products right now, which are growing week on week, becoming like very successful with no token incentives, right? We're not like Pyrex and Hidden Hand like have no butterfly incentives attached to it, and we're making pure revenue off of that. I think it would make sense as a protocol to model our token around these two products, right? And instead of having the token get rebased off of something which we now consider an outdated practice, right? It just makes more sense from a sustainability standpoint to just focus on these two products, right? Um, so we went to the community with that. It did pass, right? It did pass by like a landslide, but I think there was like some concerns about it. The thing is that like it was like short term concerns, right? More than it was like long term concerns, right? Like the butterfly V1 we just let it keep rebasing. We just let it keep rebasing. Like, the supply would have been like 6 million like
Hmm.
by now or something, right? And like obviously that's no way to like there's no way to run a protocol, right? And like you tell people just to be real with you guys, like you tell people like it's about the market cap, not the price or whatever, right? And it's like obviously it's about the market cap, not the price, but people don't see that, right? And like your token can go from like something crazy to something really low, but at the same time like your market cap hasn't even really changed, right? These are all things that like people do really care about, right? Like obviously it's not something that I want to spend my time on. I'd rather focus on the things that are making us money, but at the same time, like these are things that are holding you back as like a protocol from like shining and being in your own lane and stuff like that, right? And I feel like one thing we try to like really like put out to the world is that we really try to do like innovative shit. Like we don't. I would say like we don't try to just like copy people and take people's ideas and stuff. Like um, there's a few projects out there now that are kind of like in hand, but when that came out, like that was like a novel idea. I think like when people read the Dinero white paper, like they'll see like it was worth the wait. um, and it just wasn't very redacted of us to like keep following the tokenomics of like another product. Let's say that.
Got it. Yeah, I want to get into a little bit more of like the redacted products, such as like Hidden Hand and Pyrex, and like the developments happening there. With Hidden Hand, it's come out that you guys are working pretty closely with Berachain. Can you go into that a bit? Is Hidden Hand and bone incentives gonna be integrated kind of at like the Geth level of Berachain, or is it something else? Did I get that right?
Yeah, we're working on it. Yeah, so like the thing is like with Hidden Hand, like again, it's that same issue I said, like the reason we're putting out the narrow, right? Like it's too focused on the application layer. And the thing is it's such a composable tool that we can do something like that where we can bake it into the base layer of a chain, right? Like Bearchain. Um and yeah, I mean, I think I think it's already public, right? But the general idea is that the validator rewards and the way Bearer is getting emitted out to not only the validators but the protocols themselves that are building on the chain, which is really important. I'm not gonna go on a I'm not gonna try and bear chain pill everyone, but let's just say that it's like the coolest fucking chain that's like come out in like the last 2 years, right? The way that like bearer incentives go out to the builders and the people that are actually filling blocks on the chain opens up the door for something like Hidden Hand to come in and let the builders find a way to increase their treasury, increase their runway by working directly at the consensus level of a chain, which I think is just like, for like a lot of chains, it's just completely um, like not non-existent, right? But this is something that we also explored with like Avalanche and Benki, which is not like finalized yet because Benki's doing something and then Avalanche is doing something. But like this is also something we're exploring with them, right? Is like, Avex subnets are coming out. How can we integrate Hidden Hand into validators, right? Like how can validators leverage Hidden Hand to like pull in bigger delegate sets? And then with Bearchain, we're looking at it like how can the entire chain leverage Hidden Hand to direct block rewards to like the correct market participants, right? Um, So I'd say as a whole, like, we're really focused on like creating new hidden hand applications that go even further than just like a DEX's gauge mechanism or something like that.
Mm. Between this and Daenerys, it sounds like Redacted's going after the consensus layer, or like at least like the block space layer.
Yeah,
Like so,
well, this is the thing, dude, right? Like DeFi, like we all love DeFi, right? But the fact of the matter is, like, um, you want to build like a sustainable protocol that's gonna last. It's gonna last for years without the dependence on one person. Like one issue we had when we launched was that we're so dependent on Convex being a success, right?
Yep.
We were so dependent on Convex being a success, and that's no way to us telling our token holders that is just not something that like gets me up in the morning, right? Like we want to build like a structure that like can exist completely in and of itself, um, creates its own revenue that's not coming from like other sources, or I'll say real yield, right? We want to create real yield. um, and the way to do that is to just keep working down the supply chain. So I think like
mm,
consensus is the path that like a lot of projects should be focused on, or rather like the block space layer is like what we are really focused on like internally, because it doesn't matter if Curve is a success. It doesn't matter if like another L1 overtakes Ethereum even, right? Like if we're working all the way down there the same way that like Flashbots is at, or the same way that Chainlink is at right now, then I think you put yourself in a position where you don't have to even play these DeFi games to be a success, right?
yeah, even where Frax is, focusing their time, especially with Fraxi and Fraxi, where they came up with a little information there. It seems like the consensus layer is, I guess the next frontier for a lot of protocols when they realize like, hey, we need to be sustainable for the years to come. And what's more
Yeah.
sustainable than that real yield from, consensus?
It's the curve wars, eh? Like the Ethereum blocks are actually like that's like really what the curve wars are like on the consensus level, right? But actually like on a much more sustainable way. Um,
Mm,
if like us, Frax, and like a couple others and stuff are fighting over like validating blocks, building blocks, owning the blocks that are coming out, right? Like you're involved directly in the success of like Ethereum and not dependent on like niche ecosystems. Yeah.
Right.
mm.
And do you see this going deeper and deeper until, butterfly chain comes out? You
Butterfly
know,
chain?
No, no, no,
Yeah.
no.
like so it
Um,
yeah.
no, no. I'd say like one thing that's been getting me really excited lately is like Cosmos and the way that ecosystem is forming. But Redacted, we're ETH boys, right? We're ETH
Mhm.
boys. That's what we love. Um, when I have my when I have my Berachain hat on, I'm a Cosmos boy. But when I have my Redacted hat on, like we're going for ETH. Like that's what we want to become. Like you know, we want to become like one of the biggest apps on Ethereum, right? And the way I look at it is like, in order to strive there, like we really have to get down to that layer and not really focus on launching like a layer two or something like that, right? Because I feel like there's more value to actually be extracted on mainnet than there is moving up to the layer twos.
Mm. Got it. Yeah. I would say like after learning about Berachain and taking a deep dive into that more, that was the first time I really looked into anything Cosmos because I've, been hearing about it for years. I
Hmm.
remember in like 2017, 2018 when people were talking about Tendermint, I was like, what is this? And those guys have just been quietly building and, between all these different Cosmos chains, whether it was, Osmo, Chronos is on Cosmos, what else? Juno, and now Berachain, like they're doing a lot. And now they're all in no, they're all in Colombia right now for Cosmos Verse. There's like, I'm just like, oh, I'm having like a tiny bit of FOMO down there. But I'm an
Yeah,
ETH
for
boy
real.
too. But
Yeah.
like, you can respect like the
Yeah, you
grind
could
that
You
they're
totally
can
putting
respect
respect
in.
that.
Cosmos.
Yeah.
You can
Like,
respect Cosmos 100%.
dude, if Cosmos had the BD power of like Polygon, I think they'd be
Oh
so
my.
much further away, like ahead rather. Because I went to Cosmoverse in Portugal last year as well, and it was like very, they have the challenge, and it's quite public that they have a challenge getting dev to really on board and really build out that ecosystem. But those who do adopt the Cosmos hat, they become diehards immediately. They feel like you could build your version of Ethereum on Cosmos. You like Ethereum that much, you can have one. Like it's
It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much Berachain. Like,
Well, that's the
yeah.
thing, right? Like now I'm talking about I've been building Redacted for 9 months now, right? Yeah, I've been doing that every single day, and like I'm thinking about it more and more, and like the concept of a smart contract is actually holding us all back, right? All of us builders, the concept of a smart contract is what's actually holding us back from like, reaching that next stage of like adoption, right? And like I said, like I'm helping the Berachain guys a lot now. And when I start to like wear my hat and say, okay, this is the stuff we can do on top of Berachain, but wait, we can play around with the mempool. We can create mesh security with the Cosmos Hub. We can do isolated mempools with this, and we can change around the validators with that. It gives you so much like more to work with, which is why I'd say like that's why like a big focus for me now is just like yeah. I mean I've just been repeating myself, but like um, it's sort of just like keep working down because you unlock so much new potential that no one has tapped into yet. So yeah, that's what I'm really bullish on right now.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, but with Ethereum, I have to say there is some merit for a certain set of standards that everyone has to follow with smart contracts and with certain things. Everybody has to play by the same rules on the same field and share
For yeah,
yeah, definitely
for
yeah.
for a user facing application though, right?
Hmm.
And then how long are these protocols really user facing, right? All the ones who have truly made it, right, are not user facing applications anymore, right? Like in the real world, anyways, B2B is like a much bigger opportunity for most people than going
True.
directly to consumer, right? I
Hmm.
think I think that there is a world where like people will fight over like consumer attention, but it looks like centralized exchanges and the BSCs of the world will like capture that. For us who are trying to like innovate and continue building, like really the bigger opportunity is focusing on working with other DAOs and other other like blockchains and stuff like that, right? And that's really where the value is to be captured, right? Like uh, there's a huge problem in this industry where like everyone is so focused on capturing like retail's attention when actually there's like an untapped gold mine, which is value extraction from the chain itself.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this then, Sammy. What does success look like for Butterfly?
Yeah, that's a good question. We already know what our end goal is, right? And our end goal is to sort of be um, this back end liquidity engine that the same way you plug in. Um, it's a bad example, but I think it's an easy example for like non-technical people to understand. The same way you plug in Chainlink into your smart contracts, the same way you have Open Zeppelin standards, the same way you have the same way you're using like truffle and ganache or something, even the same way you're using these things to launch your application today. The goal for Redacted by the end of next year is to have a fully immutable set of smart contract tools that when people are building out their governance architecture and their token distribution standard, they're using Redacted to do that.
God,
Well put.
and in that success case, what would the benefits accrue to RL Butterfly and GL Butterfly look like?
Yeah. So at well, I guess this is a question for value capture or fees or yeah. So the butterfly token, like I said, when we reach a stage of immutability, there will be no governance per se, right? But with the RL butterfly token, we hope that we can create this like product that people can like lock their butterfly into, and they can directly see 100% of the fees that are getting accumulated by the things that people are building on top of Pyrex, on top of Hidden Hand, on top of Dinero, right? Whereas with the GL butterfly token, that's sort of like a product that we'll release for other DAOs and other bigger market participants, let's say, to not take the dollar value that's being created by Redacted, but extract the governance power that's being created by Redacted, the meta governance power that's being created by Redacted. Does that answer the question or not really?
Well, it answers it for me because I'm familiar with the deep system, but for like, I'm trying to understand if Butterfly gets to a stage where it becomes immutable and no longer needs governance to help control it. The value of GL Butterfly is really just on the meta governance level, right? Because Butterfly is self-operating and immutable.
Yeah. Well, even we're gonna put out GL Butterfly before we become immutable, right?
Hmm.
But the thing is, like, when we still have governance active, like, both the RL token and the GL token can govern the redacted platform. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I see. I thought
Yeah, yeah. So
the
GL
governance
is
power
solely
was
to
separated. Yeah.
no, no, no. So GL would solely be to manage the assets that have been accrued in the treasury for, accessing governance at like a better rate than the vanilla tokens.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So like RL and GL can exist in a system where we're immutable or not immutable because if we have governance active, like both the tokens can manage the redacted platform, right? Yeah. Like I said, we're not really focused too much on like the redacted platform
Mhm.
governance because we want to get rid of that entirely, right? So GL has always been focused on the abstraction of the governance within the protocol.
Got it.
Yeah, I wanted to get into Pyrex a bit again because I was snooping around your governance forum before our interview, and I saw a little alpha with a GMX being integrated into Pyrex. So I saw that proposal. Can you go into that a bit more and how it works?
Yeah, totally. So I guess like for those who aren't familiar, the first Pyrex protocol, like the MVP was with the CVX token, right? Um, and now we're at a stage where the second round of audits for the new code base have been finalized, and the new code base is like much more composable and easier to like fit into basically any token that exists right now. Um, so we're gonna keep on pushing out the next set of like Pyrex products, and the first one, like you just mentioned, is GMX, right? The 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 thing is, like we looked across like a bunch of different products, right? Like you could do FXS, you could do some of the things that are already on Hidden Hand. You can do anything really with the new Pyrex module, right? The concept is quite simple, but GMX has this thing because they're on Arbitrum, like they lack a bunch of money Legos on Arbitrum right now, and that's why a lot of people are building there. And we looked at like the future roadmap for GMX, since new GLPs or like user created GLPs, all these different things, and we think like there will be a significant amount of like governance value that will be created out of the GMX token solely because of like it's clearly like the direction they're with like all the new things they're putting out. And on top of that, it's a fee monster, right? With not an easy way to like auto compound the rewards, right? Because of ESGMX and stuff like that. So for us, we think like putting Pyrex on GMX is the next natural thing to do because it really proves Pyrex's PMF, um, by essentially showing people that you can put in something like the GLP in there, you get back liquid tokens of the ESGMX, you get back your liquid GLP, which is auto compounding, all this sort of stuff, and then we show users that using Pyrex, you can actually sell future GLP yield, you can sell future GMX governance power, all that sort of stuff in like a super simple, easy way. And then as GMX starts to roll out all these things, we'll sort of already be there. So we're kind of taking a bet on GMX with Pyrex. But I think just in terms of like, it's a really like early stage ecosystem that like not a lot of people are like recognizing the value in. Maybe from like a price standpoint they are, but from like a builder's perspective and like a value extraction perspective, like a lot of people are not seeing that. So we think like the next logical step for us is to put Pyrex on GMX.
Yeah, and with Pyrex, and because you said you split between like the principal and like the fee generating part of the token, do you guys face liquidity issues at all when trying to like make markets for the fee generating part of the token? Like, how do you deal with that, and how do you solve that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's not like the prettiest answer, but I'd say like um, the in terms of like the liquidity, the LP token, right?
Hmm.
You have your wrap token paired against the base token. Um, the way we solve that for Convex right now, it's a bit different because we're like one of the biggest holders of CVX, right? So we were able to like direct CVX there and build the LP naturally. But with GMX, we actually have like a really cool standard, which I think is like a problem that a lot of people face right now with the different GLP auto compounders that exist. Is that there's no way for them to actually get out, right? There's no liquidity for them to like exit their position, which is preventing a lot of large deposits. But the way we've designed it is that the fees that we do capture on the PX GMX product are 100% rerouted in the early days, 100% rerouted back into Hidden Hand, which is our other product, which then incentivizes bouncer holders to vote for our LP, which will in turn basically create a flywheel. This is Flywheel Pod. It'll create a flywheel where the more people that use Pyrex GMX will actually increase the fees, which increases the depth of liquidity. So that the liquidity pool is always being is only going up with the amount of people that are depositing in Pyrex. So you can guarantee
Uh,
that like if your deposit comes in, like a really simple way of putting it is like the fees aren't 5%, but let's say they are. If you put in $100 into Pyrex, $5 of that is basically used to then go on Balancer and make sure that we get $10 of Balancer rewards, aka like $10 of liquidity to put back into your position so that you can get out.
mm, the
It was
com-
that your question or not really?
yeah, yeah, and I didn't even think of that. I like the composability between your products right there, and like I feel like we should take a shot every time a flywheel is mentioned. I wish I had
Oh, that's such a good
something.
name.
Like I should have like a shot glass just filled out next time, and somebody every time like a flywheel is created or like laid out, just take a shot.
That's
100%. Yeah,
yeah.
that would be a ton of fun.
That's such a clever design. So essentially, every dollar that I use to deposit, a part of that dollar is actually used in incentives to incentivize more liquidity into that pool for me.
No
So
dollars to
that
waste.
yeah, so that you can no dollar goes to waste, so that you can always make sure that you get out of your
If
position.
I need to.
And
Yeah.
so Pyrex are Pyrex markets made on using Balancer? Did I get that right?
No,
Or
no.
Balancer
So
rewards? Okay, go ahead.
well, that's like the hidden hand part, right?
Hmm.
But Pyrex can be used for anything, right? It can be used for an L1 token. It can be used for something like GMX, Convex, FXS, whatever the case is. It can be used for stable coins, right? Anything that is like creating yield, like Pyrex can be applied to.
When Pyrex FXS?
Yeah, we talked about it. I think like, because we have a bunch of FXS also.
Hmm.
Um, we looked at like some of the competitors that exist right now, and I think like our better offering to like the Frax ecosystem is actually Hidden Hand because of some of the new features we're rolling out for it. So we're putting like a lot of our effort on the Frax ecosystem solely on Hidden Hand rather than like the Pyrex standpoint because I think like the products that are being offered to people right now are like they do the job, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Hmm. So, like, what are you thinking for your new offering?
Yeah, yeah. So we have a bunch of FXS in the treasury right now,
Hmm.
and I think like there's compared to Balancer or compared to Convex, um, you look at the voting efficiency and just the way the LPs are designed and the way the gauges are designed. I'm sure they'll change eventually, but let's say this: it's more optimal for you to bribe Convex than it is to bribe FXS, right? But we're actually creating a system where we're repurposing the FXS that we've accumulated over the past few months to go as like a vote booster to anyone who bribes through Hidden Hand. So we've talked with, you might have seen the new Badger Frax BP proposal.
Mm.
Anyone who has the Frax BP, one thing we're going to do is basically tell people that like if you bribe through Hidden Hand, you can actually get a more efficient rate by bribing FXS than you can by bribing CVX. So we're going to hopefully divert some of the bribe attention over from Convex to Frax by repurposing our FXS as using it as like a booster mechanism.
Mm.
Does that
Got
make
it.
sense? I'm saying, but
Yeah.
like I don't mean to like come onto the flywheel pod and talk about like flywheels, but at the same time, like these are just like
No,
random
this
strategies that
is
we're doing to like
we're
increase
this is
usage.
just we just riff and go, and just have a natural conversation. If the conversation leads to flywheels, then so be it.
So we got to take a shot,
It,
you
it,
know?
You gotta
it's
take a
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's perfect for Frax, because I think like the user base of Frax and these people that are creating Frax VPs, like this is what they want, right? Like the reason they're pairing against Frax VP is for like deep liquidity, right? And I
Hmm.
Hmm.
think like Convex is like super competitive right now. Um, but like you as a new project can like launch with a Frax VP and leverage the hidden hand Frax V2 and like get like you can get ahead of the competition. Let's say that.
Got it. So you're
All right,
talking about using FXS to vote on the FXS gauges instead of voting on the CVX gauges because those things are super competitive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Or you bribe the FXS holders to vote for your thing, and then we would
Mhm.
blacklist our FXS, so you can essentially get like a 2x.
oh, so it's a boost using the.
Depends on the size. Yeah, but like essentially like a 2x vote boost on your bribes for like bribing FXS instead of CBX.
If your size is size, then you get that boost.
This is part of the reason that like this is part of the reason that like I don't regret doing the old model, because now we have so much stuff in our treasury where we can put out super novel ideas like this and like find usage in new ways.
No, I
Got
agree. Like the fact that you use the bonding mechanism to get all that CVX, CRV, and FXS when you started was such a bootstrap that, you kind of develop this moat for yourselves. And you can use that, and create products that other protocols couldn't.
Yeah, that's the goal, man. That's the goal.
Yeah.
and I'm trying to understand the fees that come off of hidden hands, right? And these fees normally come in whatever native token the bribe is, right? Whether it be Aura, RPL, or whatever it is. Do those bribes get swapped into like ETH or swap into something else, or do they come in as is and stay as is in the treasury?
Yeah. So yeah, using hidden hand as an example, there's a 4% fee, 2% goes to the treasury, 2% goes to the holders. Um, what goes back to the holders is converted back into ETH, right? So that is converted back into WETH. What comes into the treasury, it really depends on what our community elected strategic
Mm,
asset committee decides to do with it. But there is projects that are power users of our protocol, like Aura, that have come to the DAO and said, "Hey, can you whitelist us to because we're putting like X% of our supply through Hidden Hand. Like, can you whitelist us to not harvest it back into ETH or something?" So it's really a case by case basis, but I'd say for the most
got it.
part, like we try to give our holders something easy and manageable to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. And obviously, you guys are expanding into RB with the GMX move. Do you kind of foresee going to other L2s, or do you
Hmm.
pretty much just want to stay on RB?
We talked with ZK Sync today. Actually, that was pretty fun.
Ooh.
Um, we'll see what that ecosystem sort of turns out to look like. But there's some cool shit on ZK Sync, like paying for gas and tokens other than ETH. There's also Optimism, which we've deployed Balancer. We deployed the Balancer market onto Optimism as well. We're talking with KeyDAO, which is there on
Hmm.
Optimism.
Hmm.
Couple other things there. Avalanche, we're doing some fun stuff with. That's more of a side chain than an L2. But Arbitrum, obviously, I think we announced Plutus. We're coming over there with Hidden Hand, and then Pyrex with Art. We're trying to get anywhere and everywhere, dude. Anywhere and everywhere.
Wait, can we go back to ZK Sync? I'm definitely
Yeah, I was gonna be
interested in
like,
that. Wait, wait. So I guess like what's going on with ZK Sync? Are they coming? Is there ZKVM imminent? Like, is there like a lot of? Do you know if there's a lot of progress there? And like, what other projects are you excited about on ZK Sync where you can
Well, I'm
see?
the wrong person to ask, bro. I'm the wrong person to ask. Like, I definitely. Well, they told me like soon TM, right? Like, that can mean like a
Soon.
lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, but
soon
like I'd
TM.
imagine that can mean a lot of things. You know what I mean?
It
But
could be
like
next
I
week.
just
Yeah, it could be in like 5 months from now. Who knows?
yeah, I'd assume the fact that they're like hitting up like a bunch of like I know that we're not the only project they talk to. Like, I'd assume that like because they're talking to a bunch of projects right now, it really is soon TM. And some projects that we're excited about on there. For us, like just thinking about like the way our products work right now, it makes more sense for us to work with like projects that are like native to chains rather than projects that have deployed to chains. So for us, we
Mm,
can get more out of the native ZK Sync decks than we can out of Curve deploying on ZK Sync, as an example, right? So yeah, like we're excited about ZK Land. Um, see, like we got that chat spinned up. Let's see what else we got here. Uh,
I bet you Sammy is
Trustless.
just scrolling through his Telegram to see all the groups that's being made right now.
Yeah, no, because
Infinite
like it's
groups.
just exciting, dude. Like
Infinite.
I love when like you talk to like a new chain or something. Like it's like kind of like Berachain. I love when you talk to like a new chain and there's like actually like new things for you to like do and like leverage to your like advantage, right? So
Yeah.
I think there'll be like a ton of cool stuff that gets built on this chain, to be honest.
How big's the team right now for Redacted?
We're at 17 people right now.
Damn. That's a
Damn.
that's a solid number.
Yeah.
Yours,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's a mix of devs, BD, policy people. Yeah, I'd say like 17 like full-time folks, and then like maybe like five or so part-time.
What's it like setting policy for Redacted?
Oh man, it's a pain. You hear all the things we're talking about. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I can
But
only imagine like all the fine intricacies of like every protocol and
Yeah,
whatnot.
but then you see sometimes like this stuff that crosses over between Pyrex and hidden hand, and then sometimes you have to get the treasury involved with bootstrapping a new hidden hand market, et cetera, right? So we do try to make them all work together and like composable. Um, so it's a lot, right? But I'd say like it's nothing that we can't handle.
Yeah, of course. I want to bring it back to Frax for a sec. Um, I guess where do you see Frax's place in DeFi from your observation?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, I'd say like like with Frax, there's a bunch of different things that are coming out now, like Fraxland, Frax Swap, Frax ETH, etc. But I think like in the end of the day, like it all kind of really revolves around the Frax stablecoin more than any of the other products, right? Um, not to like not to like give Frax strategy advice because clearly they don't need that. But like I think like um, using like the new things that they're putting out to like show examples of how composable the Frax stablecoin can be is kind of like really a good move because I think like now with like Frax Lend coming out, I think like it'll actually the better part about Frax Lend will not really be like the fees that are created or like the adoption that sees, but the fact that like other DeFi protocols will look at it and see, oh, if we just integrated Frax instead of DAI, instead of LUSD, whatever, then we could have unlocked this functionality or this feature, right? And then this, you could say the same thing about Frax Swap or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the new products that are coming out are like super exciting, just to show like from a composability standpoint what it could look like if you revolved your whole dApps stablecoin aspect to revolve around Frax rather than like the DAIs or USDCs of the world. Because I think that's like super powerful. So I think the way I see Frax fitting in is like really more around the stable coins than the protocols that they're launching. But I think that's like more exciting actually than like the protocols they're launching, if that makes sense.
You sound excited about both.
Yeah.
I sound excited about both. I haven't used like Fraxland yet, but I think like I understand like what they're going for sure. But I think like it's really gonna unlock like a ton of new money markets that are like I think like it'll unlock the ability for like Aave to like look at Frax and be like, oh shit, like there's like a completely novel Aave like lending market that we can create around Frax and like just around that, just by creating that like really capital efficient LTV then like
Hmm.
people will be more inclined to borrow Frax than they will be inclined to borrow DAI or something when the time comes.
Yeah, and those numbers make a difference. People do look at those rates and be like, where can I get the best deal? I mean, that's how Subo
Exactly,
was like.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Have you used Frax Swap?
Well, last time I checked Frax Swap, it was just FPI, FPIS, Frax, and FXS, right?
No, they added a bunch more assets. There's
Okay,
Sin,
so I haven't.
Yes,
there's
and yeah.
Zigzag. Yeah, no, I've actually used the TOM before. I'm like, wow, it's a DCA machine. This is really cool.
Yeah, I gotta get hit, bro. I gotta get hit. I'm using like honestly like yeah, I think like again, maybe like I'm using the things that I'm excited about. So like actually like I'm paying more attention to like the Frax BP stuff,
Hmm.
just from like a yield perspective, and then looking at like the gauges and how we can like get the most out of that. So
Hmm.
again, like I think maybe that's why I'm more excited about the stable coin itself because I think like there's way more to get unlocked from that end than I think the products that are coming out. But it's cool that there's like fucking like eight different things that are like coming out that like different people are excited about.
Yeah,
Eight
dude.
different things from
And
eight
it
devs.
all and it all ties back to the Frax stablecoin, right? That's why on the Frax check, our weekly Frax check, we always end with what is the Frax circulating supply because we just need that number to go up and to the right. And then we would have like truly on-chain liquidity for all your needs. You need to lend, we got a big market for that. You want to swap big, your size is size, we got a market for that. I think that's definitely the bull case for me too, is to have the Frax like
Exactly,
everywhere.
is the stable coin itself. Yeah,
Yeah, it's DeFi's native dollar stable coin.
yeah.
That's like,
I'd be like I'd like for example, like you just mentioned like Sin is on like FactSwap, right? Like I think
Hmm.
to put it in perspective of what I'm saying, like I'd be way more excited about like learning about like a new Frax AMO that's like powering Frax to be more multi-chain through Synapse than like Syn listing on FraxSwap, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Continuing on, where do you see the relationship between Frax and Redacted going in the future, and how do you see you guys having a symbiotic relationship?
Yeah, 100%. We've had like a close relationship with Frax like since we launched, eh? Like they were the next asset we started bonding after CRV and CVX was FXS. We have a significant amount of supply, um,
Hmm.
relatively speaking. Um, I'm excited about the ways that we're applying it, right? With respects to the FXS gauges and stuff like that. Um, we've become super tight with like a lot of the projects that are building there, Pitch. There was like another privacy one that we talked to not too long ago. So we're excited about like a lot of the projects that are building on top of Frax. And I think again for us, like, you know, the protocols that we have or like the token supplies that we have, like it can only do so much. So like for me, like I'm like pretty excited about Pitch or something, or I'm pretty excited about one of the other projects building on top of Frax because then that enables us to like leverage our FXS in more ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think like it's a good it's a good working relationship. I think there'll be more stuff. Eventually there'll be a pit. Eventually there'll be a PX FXS PX pitch all this sort of stuff, right? One day. So
Ooh.
I think like yeah, there'll be a ton of cool stuff that comes out because Frax has like the same Frax has like that dog mentality that like we like.
They
I
got
just
that
want to.
dog in them. That dog in them.
I just want to rewind really quick. The moment you said PX pitch, my mind just like froze. Like it was like there's a glitch in the matrix right there. Like that would be so meta of you to do. You have meta on meta.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Well, I think a lot of people just assume that Pitch is like a competitor or something, right? Like I talk with Charlie like frequently. Super cool dude. Like this
Yeah.
really like the zone that we're in or like the field that like we're trying to play in, has no competitors, right? In the sense that like the stuff we're building is like so composable that there's like there's no reason for it to be competitive with anyone, right? There's like always a way for us to work together with protocols and make your protocol better and also make ours better. So like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
really don't have like a competitive mindset with anyone. Again, like the same is said for like De Niro. Like when De
Mm.
Niro comes out, like we're not coming for like Frax's neck or something, right? Like we're just like like we have our own thing that we try to plug into and play into, and like the way we build things or the way we try to architect our different modules is to be like able to like plug into things that people would consider competitors of us.
Yeah. Kudos to you guys for
Got it. Yeah, I
having
feel
this
like
past.
you.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say like Sammy and Sam over Sam K from Frax. They both have this like net
Positive sum.
positive, always grow, grow, grow together stronger type of mentality, which I feel is so critical to like the success of DeFi across the board. But
Especially this early.
especially this early. And I know we've been kind of like bull tarding across this whole pod this whole time. So, I got to come in with some, Bera stuff rather than just Berachain. So, Sammy, like, what are some fears or things that kind of keep you up at night?
Uh, that's a good question, Nate. One thing that's like really getting on my nerves recently is like I wouldn't say like the censorship of like dApps. I think like dApps got to do what they got to do, but I think like there's talk, right? And usually when there's talk, that means that eventually it'll turn into a narrative. But there's talk about like censorship at like the transaction level, right? Through Infura one day maybe, Flashbots maybe, right? And I think that's part of the inspiration by like creating Dinero. But I think like when you start messing with the consensus of a chain, like that keeps me up at night because that means that you're that means that you're like that means that that's kind of like a threat to like my organization or my DAO that I've been working on building on your chain for all this time, right? So like the things I'd say like the things under me are kind of like what's concerning. I'd say the application layer, the obvious answer would be like regulation and stuff like that. But I think that's like people are a bit like in over their heads about that. I think it's kind of just like natural. The same thing happened for like a lot of industries that were like competitive, right? It's not that big of a deal. I think like a lot of us will find our way around it. But I'd say like it gets scary when you start thinking about like how low they can really go. uh, with respects to like censoring transactions and stuff. I think that's like a big issue one day.
Yeah, it really keeps us all in limbo. No pun intended.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Wow,
Yeah.
bro, you picked the existential fear to lay it on everybody.
Because
But
the
it's
thing is,
true.
the thing
It's
is, like,
true. This is make or break, like all
the
of
thing is
us.
that yeah, the thing is that nothing else is existential, right? Like people
True.
are so scared about like DeFi apps getting regulated. Like it's not that bad of a thing. Actually, like the more regulated DeFi becomes, I bet you there'll be a direct correlation with the amount of TVL that comes in, and it also helps a lot of us founders like know how to operate in the space, right? Like
Hmm.
no one's doing anything illegal, right? Like, well, I mean, some people are scamming and doing illegal things, but like everyone's just operating in a gray zone. So like regulation in DeFi is not that bad of a thing, right? The problem is that when you start trying to regulate the chain itself, like that to me is a bigger issue than like the dApps like figuring out how to register or something like that.
Yeah. It's like regulating internet service providers on like what
Yeah,
can and
that's
can't
that's
go
messed
through.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Then there would be no open internet, honestly. It would just be the same as TV channels or radio stations or something.
yeah, yeah. So hopefully, like we never get there. But the thing is, like, we actually have to like as an industry, like we actually have to put more focus instead of like getting mad at like Aave for like blocking US users or something. Like, come on, bro. Like the bigger issue is like not there. Like that's something that can easily be solved as like more people figure out what's going on, right? But like I don't think a lot of people, like, maybe because people aren't technical, but like a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to actually like now with POS and stuff to like actually go and like start censoring transactions, right? And that's goes completely against what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, so what do you think, or do you have any ideas on what we should do to, keep that drum beating against, censoring transactions and, keeping Ethereum and just this whole world open?
Dinero, bro, dinero. No,
Dinero, Dinero,
um,
you've been hearing it here. Dinero.
Plug.
Plug.
no, you like again, it's too early for any of this shit, man. Like
Hmm.
it's too early to tell like what we really have to be focusing on. I think it's dope of like Infura to like, now release like a decentralized solution. I think like people talk a lot about like decentralized front ends, but I'm starting to see like a lot of people actually starting to work on them. That like I see like subgraphs are getting more like developer help, which means it'll be easier to launch these things. So like people are heading in the right direction. Like the thing is we just don't want to have the worst happen, right? Like even if something bad really does happen, right? Where like a tornado cash situation, right? That like really opens up people's eyes to like build a decentralized GitHub and build this and build that, and I think like the industry is like starting to get there. So I wouldn't say it like keeps me up at night, but I'd say like it's something that like people don't talk about enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tornado Cash really woke a lot of people up on what is possible in the worst way. And people
Yeah,
are
yeah.
starting to think,
I
yeah,
mean, like right now, for sure, people think there's a lot of people out there that think like the worst thing that can happen is like a DeFi protocol getting shut down or something, because of regulations. Like it can get worse than that. And actually, like that's yeah, you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. One thing people could do is run, I think with proof of stake, it's easier to run your own nodes or like at least
Hmm.
light clients on your own desktop or even browser.
Hmm,
So,
hmm.
so like that's another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like need more education there. Definitely.
Don't ask what Ethereum can do for you. Ask what you can do for Ethereum. You know,
There
100%,
we
bro.
go. There we
100%.
go.
right here, baby, right here.
This is the thing. Like we all said we're ETH boys, right? But like I feel bad for like the other chains, bro. Like um yeah, like Ethereum is like yeah, like Ethereum is Ethereum, and like the things that they could do if they wanted to is scary. But like these other chains, bro, I don't know. Like I'm kind of happy like we're building on Ethereum.
Yeah, no, I think ETH holds a special place in all our hearts, mainly because, it it showed like this is like what you can do with smart contracts that are truly sovereign, immutable, and permissionless. And they were the first ones to do it, and they really and they built in the face of such adversity and went through so many different dark periods from their
Oh
launch
yeah, yeah,
to the
yeah.
Dow to the last bear market. Like this bear market seems like roses compared to the rest. I mean, that might not
Correct.
seem like the case for the class of 2020, 2021, but like Ethereum went through a lot of shit to get to where it is today
Oh
and
yeah,
like upheld
100%.
those values like throughout that entire time.
So yeah, like you know what the issue was before? It was that like when like the stuff started to happen, like the last bear cycle, when a lot of the bad stuff came to light, like a lot of people were like, "Holy shit, like crypto's dead," right? Like I don't think anyone, I think everyone's mindset now is like, okay, this is like something that has to get fixed, and like people are
Hmm.
starting to work on it. Whereas like before, like something would happen, and everyone's like, okay, it's over, you know?
It's over. It's
Yeah,
over.
yeah, it's over.
Yeah. I mean, we got so lucky kind of with regulation last cycle because there's a universe where Ethereum got ruled of security by the last administration, but what actually happened was it got ruled, it was a security during sale, but eventually became decentralized enough. And that actually set a precedent for other protocols in the future to decentralize over time and become immutable over time.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think that's kind of like the wave like we're on, to be honest. Like we really are putting like a big focus on immutability after the Dinero launch because like think like we're confident, like we're really confident in the stuff that we've built and like the way it can be used and stuff, and like um, we can focus like the efforts, or we can focus like the brain power that we've like consolidated and redacted to like help like do more good than like um, constantly like confusing users on what our flywheels are.
Yeah. Not just a positive sum player on the application level in DeFi and in the DeFi ecosystem, but a positive sum player on the consensus level in the Ethereum ecosystem.
That's where it all matters, bro. That's where it all matters.
That's what all matters. Yeah.
Facts. I do wanted to ask you, Sammy, before we hop off here, like outside of DeFi, are there other areas and applications, on Ethereum that kind of excites you?
Yeah, we were talking about like Portugal and shit. I was working out of this office, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like the guys from, oh, actually no, it wasn't in the office. It was in like the hacker house I was staying in. They were working on this thing called like Vita DAO, which I think is like getting a lot of love from like Gitcoin and stuff right now. I think a lot more people know about it. But it's like this concept of like DeSci, right? Like decentralized science,
Oh,
focused on uh, uh, biochemistry, pharma, all this sort of stuff, and like bringing it on chain and like using Ethereum to like focus on IP, or like the financialization of like IP rather than like the financialization of like already financialized tools, right? Um, so I'd say like if I was not working on DeFi stuff, like that would probably be like something that like interests me. I can't say like NFTs make me like put a smile on my face, but I think like DeSci is like something that's cool, that's like bubbling up that I think will like catch steam next bull run maybe.
cool.
Cool.
What about you guys?
That's a good question. Um, I've just been bear pilled the past few weeks, to be
Oh, me
honest.
too, bro. Me too.
Yeah. Other things I'm excited about are, primitives building on top of Uniswap v3. I find that really interesting just because we talked about before how, building applications that aren't for consumers that are more B2B. I kind of view Uniswap v3 as that for financial protocols and seeing things like Arrakis, Panoptic, other ones that are using like the LP primitives for liquidity management or for even like making options themselves, I think is quite interesting. Um, Also just like ZK stuff. Like I think like ZK will be a real 0 to 1 moment, especially like ZK Sync, getting those fees down. Like that's going to make a huge difference. I think that's going to onboard a lot more people.
I mean, you guys took everything I wanted to
Is
say.
Uni V3 that is Uni V3 that Dex for you?
Unity V3. Um, I think
Is that like the winner?
I wouldn't say it's the winner. No, not. I mean, it. I mean, at the end of the day, like aggregators are the ones that route everything. I just find like Uniswap BT like really interesting, like playing with as like an LP, like playing with like the concentrated liquidity ranges. Finding like the hidden gems on like which like 1% pairs are like the real money makers at the moment. I just have like a lot of fun with that, and it's kind of just like a game of like how long can you like be in it before like there's like a big move or not. Because the thing with LP on Uniswap B3 is like you could be like profitable for like months and months and months, but it takes one big swing and boom, like all your gains are just like washed out, and that's what makes it like really dangerous, but also a lot of fun.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah,
I can't. I'm a curve boy, but I can't.
curve
I
boy.
can't hide it. I think
Yeah,
curve
no,
is the
I
biggest.
I love curve too, especially like I mean you can't go wrong with like stable swaps or like anything there. Like I don't have like a preference, but like as like an LP, I just have like I from my time at Gelato and like studying like G like for G Uni and whatnot. That's how I've got
Hmm.
that's my kind of background with Uni
I
V3.
mean, in general, LPs are definitely becoming more of like. I think like when DeFi first started becoming a thing, right? Like people definitely viewed LPs as like something that users should be doing. Whereas I feel like now, definitely like I know for well, I don't know for a fact, but like you can just tell like Uniswap is like going to be like maybe with V4 and stuff will be like depending on more institutions to be like
Oh
doing
yeah,
LPs and the protocols to be managing their own liquidity and stuff like that. So I feel
yeah.
like LPs is like, kind of out of the question, right? Like then if LPs are out of the question, like what is the big focus for the decks, right? And then you'd say like, okay, like probably like like swap efficiency and stuff like that, right? And like I just
hmm
don't see anyone coming close to curve in that sense.
Yeah. It's funny. I call them not automated market makers, but automated market takers.
Exactly.
It's more accurate. But then why do you guys feel Uniswap still captures like 70% of all of DEX volume?
See, aggregators, man, they just route, especially like for like a lot of long tail assets. Like that's where like Uniswap B3 shines.
First mover advantage, bro. First mover
Yeah, first
advantage.
mover too.
There was a time when there was a time when IDEX did more volume than Uniswap.
I remember
Oh,
IDEX.
damn,
I
Ether
throwback.
Delta. There's a time when Ether Delta did more volume than Uniswap. So again, it's too early to tell. Like,
I,
yeah,
I
it's too early to
remembered
tell.
trading on IDEX. I remember trading on Nudex, which was like when I was when I was on EOS back in my like EOS.
That was like the egg, right? The
I
logo.
was EOS had DeFi before DeFi. Unpopular opinion because they had like all this like stuff with like staking EOS and this and that, but it was just like
The logo
yeah,
was like an egg, right, with like a crab in it.
yeah. It
Yeah,
was a tetrahedron or
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, what about you, Kit? We never got to you. Like, what are you excited about?
I mean, I'm excited to see how all these like L2 play out. Like, I'm wondering if there's going to be this like roll up as a service where everybody just kind of spins up their own roll up instead of having a smart contract anymore. I'm just going to roll up and pop it. And if I needed to use this smart contract for this one NFT mint, and then after I roll it up, I roll it down. Like I wonder if we're gonna
hmm
see that. Like what behavior is gonna come out of all this like roll up and roll up centric future and how easy it is to roll up and roll down. Like that's what I want to see.
Will people choose rollups or will they choose Cosmos sovereign
I was
side
gonna say,
chains?
bro, you need to get Cosmos built. You need to get Cosmos built.
Like where are they gonna choose?
I feel like if Cosmos
This is
step
the
up
thing,
their
right?
BD,
Yeah, yeah. Cosmos needs to step up their BD for sure. But like, what's interesting? You know what? Like the golden mixture is like Cosmos Hub is Ethereum, and then L2s are Cosmos Zones, right? Like
hmm
Cosmos Zones are definitely a better alternative for you than like launching an L2, in my humble opinion. But like at the base layer, like no one is coming close to Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's like to me, it seems like Cosmos Zones. You just have like, especially like working with the Berachain guys recently, like when you start talking about yeah, like consensus and things like that, and like now like Celestia, like you're playing around with like DA and shit. Like no one is
hmm
playing around with DA on Ethereum, right? Like I think like I think like that's the move to be honest if you're talking about like roll-ups. But I could get I like roll-ups excite me too for what it's worth. L2s are exciting.
like let's double click on that DA. So DA is data availability, but could you explain to kind of like the listeners at home how that modular stack look like?
Yeah. So with a blockchain, you essentially have like four different parts, right? At the very bottom, you have like the data availability layer, which is sort of just like kind of what the name is, right? It's sort of like the layer that is storing the data, which like others can like pull from, right? And Celestia's like thesis is that while Ethereum separates the settlement layer from the execution layer, right? You Ethereum, the L1 is still doing DA and settlement at the same time, right? Um, and that is the DA is actually what's clogging Ethereum, right? Like people are starting to talk about um, uh, paying rent for storage and all this kind of shit, right? Like on Ethereum, right? And while separating the execution layer does help scale the chain, the thing that's really clogging us is actually the DA, right? So Celestia's sort of thesis, which is a Cosmos chain, is like, create something where people can create, yes, their own like settlement layer, create their own like settlement layer and create their own execution layer, all that sort of shit, but not have to worry about the chain getting clogged up with like this hasn't become an issue yet because all these chains are really new, right? Ethereum is starting to see these problems now. We're starting to foresee these problems now. But yeah, I won't go on a rant, but yeah.
Wait, what's the difference between Cosmos Hub and Cosmos Zones?
Well, Cosmos Hub is like the Atom chain, right?
Okay.
That's where they want to do the interchain security from, and like that's kind of like the main port when you're doing IBC and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
chain that's getting validated by Atom is the Cosmos Hub, and then Berachain and
Oh, the
Terra and all these
zones.
chains are considered zones.
Did you? I was gonna say, did you see Didn't Adam release new tokenomics today, or they released the white
Yeah, so
paper?
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
I saw
Mm.
some cool shit on Twitter though, bro. It was like I posted it myself. Like I saw them teasing it before, and I'm like, I know they're gonna come up with some wild shit like interconnected like shared mempools and all this kind of stuff, and like finally making Atom like a useful token, and like I know they did it. I just have to read it.
Yeah, same here.
This went full circle. Now we're back to talking about token value accrual, right? The only thing that matters for your token is what revenue you can extract out of
Well,
it.
well, for a layer one, right? Layer one, the product you're selling is actually blocks, right? That is
Right.
what gives your token
Hmm.
value. And the problem with Cosmos is not the Atom token, it was the fact that the blocks on the Cosmos hub are worthless because nothing is going through them, right? Um, so I hope that's what they solved, right? Because to me, like the way I value an L1 is like how valuable are your blocks? How much MEV can be extracted from those blocks? Were they full? How much are people paying to get in them and stuff, right? So that's what I'm hoping got fixed. I hope it's not like a pump and dump Atom situation.
At the end of the day, it's all about real estate, whether it's on chain or in the
100%.
real world.
Yeah,
Facts.
100%.
It's all real estate. I was gonna ask one more question. You said you talked to Charlie a lot from Pitch. I'm curious, like, what other things do you have down the pipeline working with Pitch? Because Pitch is obviously something close to my heart. Charlie's a close friend of mine, and it's great to know that two young, bright minds are working together.
Yeah, you know what I told him on our last call? It was like, bro, I'd say like like I just talked on for like an hour about like how we started off as like a relatively simple idea, but we want to like keep moving down the stack and find our own lane and like continue expanding and stuff like that. And I think pitch is in like the similar zone. It like there's no point trying to hide it, right? Like the pitch, Brad Market, and then we have like hidden hand like competitors and shit, right?
Hmm.
But like the thing is, like I think as our protocols both develop, as they put like more focus on like the pitch wrapped tokens, and then like we keep putting these like new developments on top of hidden hand, and they start changing their stuff. Like eventually, we'll find like our own lanes, and then because we're so similar, that's what will open up the like room for like collaboration between each other, right? So
Yeah.
I'd say like right now, like the obvious thing is like PX pitch, pitch butterfly, etc. Right?
Hmm.
Um, these are like the obvious things, but these aren't things that like these aren't things that make you like drop your jaw, right? And like I'd say like but both of us are probably just gonna keep on doing our things until we find something that like really gets people excited.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think the most important thing you said is each of you guys are carving your own lane and really like setting your own niche in this world, which is really hard to do. It's like really easy to fork, and like most projects are just forks, but to come out with something novel and new and innovative, that
yeah,
takes a
bro.
lot. Yeah, yeah, you already know.
I'll say like I'm happy like one of our competitors is pitch because I know one day like there will be something we can do together and like we have like a good relationship and stuff. I'm happy it's not like, bro, if you remember like when Redacted first launched, there was this project called Lovis, bro. It's like
Oh yeah.
Lovis
yeah,
finance. I
yeah,
remember.
That's a
yeah,
throwback.
Yeah,
bro, like I'm happy, you know. Yeah.
and did they try to front run you and launch like a couple days before Redacted did?
Bro, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm happy, like, our competitors are, like, people I know, like, we'll be able to build cool shit with eventually, like, pitch or something, you know? Like, I'm happy it's not, like, assholes,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And the thing is, like, you guys make each other better, and you guys, like you said, you guys are competitors. So I'm sure there's like a little bit of like, oh, like, what can I get like a little bit farther here and there? And like, which is good for the space, just like builders, like motivating each other to like push
Yeah, yeah,
farther. Yeah.
hundos, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. But there's a reason why you're still here.
Yeah, man, I mean, honestly, like, it's, like, people get really caught up in that shit. Like, I'd say, like, as a builder, and, like, I try to, like, help out, like, new projects as much as possible, and, like, people get so caught up in like competition and stuff like that. Like it's impossible for you to come out with something and not be competitive to someone else nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's like, and then even like CT in general, like they always try and do comparisons. Like
Always.
I saw someone comparing like GMX to Curve, and it's like, come on, bro, like like, um,
That is an awful comparison. That is
it's
like
like,
that
yeah,
is
but
a
like this is the thing, right? Like remember when Balancer came out? Remember it was like Balancer, Bancor, and like Uniswap, right? Like
Mhm.
Hmm.
those were all the same things, and then they all turned into their own thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's like people get so caught up in these things, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about like people that are new to the space, whether they're like new builders or new founders, and they step into it, and you really find out who people are when they get like a taste of success or a taste of like progress, because they might start off as like one person, and then like they might be like the hot shit next week or like in a few weeks, and then they just completely switch up on you. And I think that's like something to be aware of and something to be mindful of as you like as like builders like go about in this space, because like when new people, they haven't been brought around the ringer like us. Like I call it like they have to go through like the dark time and get humbled. Like every great builder and every great project went through that dark period, whether it was like Ethereum, Bitcoin, Cosmos, this and that, Redacted, Frax. But at the end of the day, you go through the adversity and you come out the other side stronger and more humble.
Exactly, exactly, and like yeah, this the problem is when it gets to people's heads, I think, right? Like
That's the biggest, it gets to people's
Hmm.
heads. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like actually, like we should all be like we shouldn't actually like another issue we all do is like we put so much focus on like founders and stuff. Generally, I don't mind it, right? I'd say like generally I don't mind it that like I talk on behalf of like Redacted the DAO and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like like I think like there's a problem with like actually like relating the products that people have built to the people. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's like it's an issue what you said, but it's also an issue that like we have to do that in the first place, you know?
Yeah.
The fact that
Hmm.
like one person can have so much influence over like the direction or something of a quote unquote decentralized application is like kind of worrying, right?
Yeah.
Another reason I'm bullish on like immutability.
Yeah, it's people's messiah tendency. They want a leader to look up to.
True.
It's just like easiest way to build a narrative is with a leader, which is unfortunately the case. Like I think we would all like to see the protocols speak for themselves, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I mean, people
yeah,
still do it with like Satoshi and Bitcoin, but people still
yeah,
do it.
Yeah.
He like clearly he like clearly disappeared to like not be that, but like still like people say like people credit Satoshi for doing things.
yeah. Who do you think's Satoshi?
Um, maybe Sam K, maybe.
um, Actually, Sammy, speaking of like adversity and such, like, do you have any advice to a founder who is currently building right now in the bear market, and this is kind of like their first time around it? They haven't had the PMF that Redacted has, and they're still trying to figure it out. Any tips for that guy or gal?
Um, it's really tough, right? And like I think something like that I've noticed is like people get really scared about the fact that you can't close a crypto you can't close your crypto business, right? If you commit to something and you build it, like you gotta fucking stick to it, right? And if you disappear on it, there's token holders, like there's no the way to dissolve your project and stuff like that. Like it's considered a rug, right? Like I think like to people like that who maybe like aren't finding PMF, I'd say like the best thing to do is like honestly like keep a low profile. Just like explore pivots. Like people are really scared of pivots, but at the end of the day, like pivots are like you can attribute those to like some of the greatest success stories in like business in general, right?
Yeah.
So we pivoted. Fuck, we pivoted.
Yep.
Like, like I wouldn't say it's a pivot. Like we always wanted to do it, but at the same time, like it's like, okay, just because like one thing was working and then it didn't work, it's like okay, like you can't get like caught up in that, right? And like you talked about like the V2 tokenomics and stuff, right? Like not everything is going to make everyone happy, but at the end of the day, like if you put yourself in a position where you want to take a leadership role, then you have to be willing to make like the hard decisions, because like um like if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it.
Yeah. I think that's
Oh,
like, yeah.
and traveling is great too.
Oh, what do you mean
Wait,
by
what do you mean
traveling?
about, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean about traveling?
Yeah, and like like for me, like sometimes um like if I'm having like writer's block, for lack of a better word, right? Like if I'm having like issues with something, like I find like changing scenery is like really the best thing you can do as like a founder, or like really in general, like the best thing you can do in a lot of situations is just change your scenery, right? Like I know a lot of people that went like super hard when they were fundraising and then building the initial deployment, and then they just were in the same fucking room the entire time. And crypto does that to you because the markets never turn off, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes I find myself in the same room for like 3 days or some shit, right? So I'd say like yeah, changing scenery is like super underrated.
Yeah. And on top of that, I think
That's how I met Capital K, bro. Traveling,
we come full
you don't
circle.
meet people, you don't meet cool people if you don't travel.
As someone that's been, I feel like, constantly traveling for the past over 2 years, I know what you mean. Like, and also when you travel, I think the most important thing is you meet new people that give you fresh perspectives. So you meet like people along the way and they become like your close friends and they offer you different perspectives each time. It's like between
Mm,
like the change of actual scenery and environment and then also like having those conversations with other people that, give you those new ideas and give you those fresh ideas, that will get
yeah,
you past that
yeah,
writer's block. They both play into each other.
yeah. And like I'm like semi anon, I'm not really, my name's actually Sammy, like I don't care about that too much. Like I don't have anything to hide or whatever, right? I just think honestly, I just think being anon is cool, so that's kind of why I do it. But you work with people when you work in DeFi space, you work with people that like you do not know a thing about them, And like
Yeah.
imagine like you work in like a normal business where all they promote is like culture and working with your coworkers and all this sort of stuff, and then you work in DeFi, you don't know who anyone is, right? Like it's really important to like see people, meet
Oh
them face
yeah.
to face, get to know them, and like your team synergies. Like for me personally, like meeting like people on my team that are like fully anonymous has like increased our productivity by like and more than anything, it's just like meeting these people, meeting the people on your team, going out of your way to like meet them face to face.
Yeah. Meeting people in person makes them that more real. It's not just
Yeah,
some
exactly.
random anime. Yeah.
It makes the work you're doing like much more real,
Yeah.
Yeah. What a weird industry you work in, bro.
What
But
a
that's
fun industry. Yeah.
yeah,
I love
it's
it.
fun, but it's weird that like you
It's
have to like
weird.
tell people to like
Yeah.
meet people.
Yeah. If I explain like a week, like what my week is like, it would make most people's heads spin. And I feel like you guys feel the same way, if not more, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
It's so hard explaining it to normies, bro.
How do you think we could? I mean, I don't even know if you can explain it to normies. Like, honestly.
It was really easy to explain to normies, proof of work, low key, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the worst part about POS is the fact that like it's gonna be 10 times harder to explain to people.
Yeah. Once DeFi summer started and I tried to explain DeFi to people, it just wasn't going through the same way as Bitcoin or proof of work. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, and it just keeps getting more complicated, So really, it's like, but what does click with people is like NFTs, right? And I talked about
Yep.
this a bit
Yeah.
before. Is like, um, like a lot of DeFi projects are so focused on retail, right? They want to be that cool kid on the block that like their moms know about it and shit like that. The thing is like, your mom doesn't know about BlackRock. Your mom doesn't know about like, well, I don't know who your mom is, right? I don't know who your mom is, but like your mom doesn't know about like, the way financial systems work now, like Swift and all this shit, right? Like these things are not made for like consumers to use at the end of the day, really, right? Like maybe you are building something that is meant for a consumer, but most of the time, like you're building financial tools, which in the end, after regulation is figured out and all these things, will be primarily used by hedge funds and etc.
Yeah. Do you think because we're in this gray area, where regulation isn't clear, like we're kind of like the people that are like willing to take risks are, building right now, but like once after regulation and most importantly direction comes out, then there's going to be so many more new players that come in because they're like, oh, there's direction now. I like feel comfortable with it. Like, how do you see that changing the DeFi landscape once direction and
Oh
regulation
yeah,
comes out?
you know it's like a really good interview to listen to is like remember when like Andre turned into a villain,
Yeah, yeah,
and he was
yeah,
like, but bro, I can't lie. As like a builder, he went on the Delphi podcast, and
yeah,
bro, he was just spitting facts. Like he was just like he's just spitting facts. He's like maybe he did like fuck up a couple of times, but like truth be told, like what he's doing now, like focusing a lot on policy work and regulation and making sure that like builders are heard for and like like he's giving our perspective. That's like a I can like get behind that, because it's true. There's so many people right now that have money sidelined that will simply not even get into crypto, not because it's a gray zone, but because they don't even know how to account for it on their books. You know, I was at the Bear Cave, um, and they're doing their raise or whatever. And it's like they're trying to explain to like a traditional hedge fund like how the product works or whatever, right? And it's like okay, you can do like some things like this, but then the settlement token is the equity token, right? And then the block rewards are inflation. Like the business models are just like they don't click with people. The regulations don't click with people. The accounting doesn't click with people, and like that's really what's holding back a lot of money. I don't think it's. I think a lot of people say it's like the fact that it's a gray zone. It is a gray zone, but at the same time, like I feel like it's just like basic things that like we can easily fix that we're not doing. That is like holding back like big money from coming in. Actually,
okay.
like this is like the Frax podcast. Let me find this guy. I forget what his name is. He's building. Um, okay, I'm gonna go through my Telegram while I'm talking to find the name of his project. Um, he is building a safe wrapper. He's building these things called safe tokens. He's building it for Frax BP right now. I mentioned before I was like working with like some projects that are building in the Frax ecosystem, and he's building a safe, compliant wrapper where institutions can sort of come in, know their business, know their customer, know their counterparty, and trade the Frax BP um, like on an isolated pool on Curve, which is just separated from like the rest of the DeFi space, right? And I think like people cringe at that stuff like C DeFi, but I think like stuff like that is actually what's gonna get like Frax BP to like like become like the dominant stable coin is like these people like going out of their way to like build stuff like that.
Wait, I am very curious on what this product is because I don't think I've heard
Oh,
of this
bro.
yet.
Okay, bro. Wait, hold up. His name
We
is
got it.
Casper.
Casper.
Ident. Okay,
Hmm. I might know him.
Ident DeFi.
Ident.
Identify. Okay. How does
Like
that
like
work?
bro, you're
You
asking the wrong person. I built fucking like hidden hammers.
Fair, fair, fair. Well,
You gotta message me after the show. Ident.
I sent it in the chat here. Yeah, yeah.
nice.
Okay.
Check them out, bro. Like these guys are like doing good work, and like these are like the type of things that are gonna like empower a lot more capital to flow into the space. Building on
Yeah.
Frax too, eh? So maybe a good fit for the show.
Yeah. No, seriously. So you really don't see regulation and direction being the issue. It's it's more of just money being sidelined because things aren't accounted for properly.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because regulation will come and it won't really change what's been going on too much now. Like maybe worst case, like we fucking have to like register with someone, and like these things are like it's kind of just like obvious, like it's bound to happen, right? But like the thing that's really holding people back is they just don't fully understand how to like trade these things the way they trade normal equities and stuff, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, like, each protocol accounts for revenue differently. There
Oh
isn't a set
God.
standard. We've talked about this before on the show with 0xD24. I talked about it before with a few other people. And like, if you want to like figure out the revenue, you have to like go into their white paper and figure it out. Like, oh, like this is like what they considered like real yield and this and that.
Bro, I was on calls with Capital K, like a couple months ago, and we were just trying to like we were trying to put in like how Frax makes money compared to like how Convex makes money compared to like how Redacted makes money, and it's all different. Like every single project is like operating on like a completely new business model that no other company is like working on, and it's like that really confuses people. That really
Yeah,
confuses
dude.
people for
There's
sure.
like no comps, right? Like at least in traditional finance, there is at least GAAP, right? The general accepted accounting practice or principle or whatever it stands for. But like at least there is something that everybody could agree on. But in crypto, the only metric that we all happen to agree on is this stupid thing called TVL, and the thing is actually not even locked, right? We learned that TVL is mercenary. So like yeah, I think we have a long road ahead in terms of becoming a standard that everybody accepts across the board. And but Sam, I'm curious, do you think it would come from the projects, putting a flag in the ground, be like, this is how we classify our revenues? Or do you think it would be a consortium of projects coming together and adopting the standard, or completely a separate option?
It's hard, because like I don't think I could apply the way we operate our business to how any other project is operating their business, right? Like even with Curve, it's completely different than the way Uniswap Labs makes money, right? Um, it's like I really don't think we'll see eye to eye, but actually, like in the end of the day, that actually might be an edge, is the fact that you have so many novel um, business strategies and business structures for how all these projects are making money. Like maybe that'll actually help us. It'll hurt us a lot for sure. The fact that like you can't compare a project apples to apples, but like I think it'll be an edge for like a lot of projects. I know we try to like always structure our comms to like use the way we structure our business as an advantage rather than like something that's like holding us back from like pulling in more money.
Yeah, maybe there'll be a formula created one day that just, takes everyone's different standard of, what is revenue. It
Well,
just puts,
in a
yeah.
really easy one, right? A really easy one that I use sometimes is I called it unethical yield sourcing, UYS, right? Um, like basically, a really easy one is to just like take every project, annualize the total amount of tokens that entered the market, subtract it by the total amount of money that came into the protocol, right? Because everyone says like we sourced this much revenue, we did this much revenue, blah blah blah, but you don't account for like how many tokens entered the market, which really diluted that value, right? So you can look at things like token emissions as an expense, right? And then like I think that's a really easy one. It's just looking at like um, the closer you are to one on that scale, right? The better, the more money you're making. But again, that's a shit metric, right? Like, but that's all I got.
Yeah. In addition to that, right? Sometimes projects require you to lock, like for example, with curves, you got to lock it to get any piece of the revenue, and that number of lock curve is different than the number of circulating curve. So when you're trying to find some kind of revenue accruing, you have to really divide it by BECRV and not CRV at large. So like all these nuances across the board is what I feel makes it so difficult for anyone, except for those in the know, and those in the know are not going to take the time to create a standard. So
Yeah, it makes you question like if all businesses were as transparent and public as crypto businesses, right? Would we have the same issue in TradFi as we do in DeFi, right?
Whoa.
If we only accounted for what we wanted to account for, the same way private businesses do, would it be easier for us as an industry to like provide these metrics and like tell people how to fairly value us, right?
I never thought about it like that before. You kind of just flipped it on its head, because everything is so public, everybody can point fingers and have an opinion. But if everything is kind of closed off, like I will tell you what my revenue or what my EBITDA is.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's one way to look at it. Doesn't solve the issue though.
No, it does not. It does not. But it does makes you ponder.
Yeah.
Ponder. Ponder the
Yeah.
orb.
Yeah. Dave, do you think we should hop into the lightning round, or do you have a
I
couple
think we
more
should.
questions?
I don't have
Alrighty.
any more questions, but yeah, let's just hop into it.
Cool. So, Sammy, at the end of all these interviews, we usually hit you with a couple of quick 1-2 punches of questions and just answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. All right. So question one, I'll start is what was your virgin crypto experience? And sexes don't count.
Virgin crypto experience. Um, one time I bought winter tires from a guy on Kijiji, which is like, I don't know what the equivalent to it, maybe like Facebook Marketplace. Kijiji is like a Canadian thing, I guess, or word. Um, I bought winter tires from a dude on Kijiji, and he told me he'd give me 10% off if I paid him in Bitcoin. So I fucking put on a COVID mask before COVID masks were a thing, and went to like a Bitcoin ATM at a gas station and like bought Bitcoin and then paid a dude in Bitcoin for winter tires.
What a story.
That's so
Okay.
random.
Yeah, that's probably one of
Love
the
it.
most unique
It's the
story I've heard.
what else do people say?
They
They usually
try to
just, like,
ape in
lose.
something on chain and they lost it in the bridge or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's probably an easy one.
Okay, and then the second question from my end is, what do you do off chain? Like, what is your favorite touch grass activity?
I'm such a nerd. Like, I got a PS5 like 3 weeks ago. I've been running that a lot.
Playing what?
I can't lie. I'm not like a huge gamer. Like, I love the sports games. They had like Call of Duty Black Ops 3. That was like my favorite COD. Zombies and shit. Like, I haven't been touching grass as much as I should be, to be honest.
Got it.
What is some advice you would give to your 5-year-old younger self?
Fucking buy Bitcoin, bro.
The most common answer, I swear.
Yeah, that's the
Everybody
most
says
common.
that.
Yeah, buy earlier, jump in sooner.
Yeah.
And last question from my end, what would you be doing if you weren't in crypto?
Um, I would be doing, uh, I'd be trying to get into the terraforming industry. Do you know what that is?
Is that, the manipulating of environments, so turning deserts
Yeah,
into
yeah,
grasslands?
yeah. I think that stuff's dope. Actually, like, there's this dude on crypto Twitter. I forget what it's called, but his project is called TerraPunk, right? He's trying to find a way to like involve crypto in it. But basically, like, there's like a huge industry forming right now around, like just like getting these like government contracts and stuff to like fulfill terraforming initiatives so that all these countries can reach like their Paris Agreement. And I think
Hmm.
like, I don't know, to me that's super dope because you can still have your capitalistic mindset, but at the same time like doing stuff that's like really good for the earth and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but like, bro, all I know is crypto. Like, like I went to school for 1 year. I was doing econ, and then like they opened up like a crypto post grad program in Toronto, and I did that. And like literally, like I tell people like that's like literally the only thing I know is like crypto. Like I was in school for it, and I just don't know anything else. So I guess that's an issue. But if I was to do something else, I'd probably get into something really cool like that, something pretty futuristic.
No, it's not an issue because it's the only thing I know too. Yeah, I don't think I could apply my skills anywhere outside of crypto. Maybe like
Yeah, yeah.
in like scholarly, if I was like an academic or professor or something with like other stuff I know, but like nothing would be as fun as crypto.
Nothing is as fun and nothing is as interesting, like people say blockchains are boring and blockchains at the end it's just like ones and zeros and stuff, right? But actually like I'm like that's like super interesting stuff to me. Like I don't think anything else like really, especially in like the tech world, is like as cool as crypto. So yeah.
I think all of us here are just trying to cope that we have zero transferable skills outside of crypto.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Satoshi. Thanks, Vitalik.
Yes,
And thank
yes.
you, Sammy, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me guys. That was fun chatting.
Yeah, it was super fun,
Yeah.
man. I'm
I
excited to have
I
you
couldn't
on.
make it out to your
Wait, what? What was that last thing?
I couldn't make it out to your talk, Dave, but like
No.
I'm
Well,
sure
we'll have another one. Don't worry.
yeah, I'm sure I'll catch you IRL soon enough.
Yeah. No, for
Yeah.
sure.
And we
Yeah.
gotta bring you back on when Dinero is live as well.
Yeah. We need that
Eh,
Yeah,
Dinero
yeah.
like full update, full
Okay,
Yes.
breakdown.
as soon as the white paper is out, like we'll run it back.
Perfect.
Hell yeah.
We'll come on and we'll do a line by line breakdown. But yeah, Sammy, thanks so much for jumping on.
Hey guys, that was the latest Flywheel pod with 0xSami. That was one marathon of an episode where we covered everything, and I think the builders and the DGens deep who have their tents pitched on chain are going to appreciate this one. What'd you think, Kit?
I highly recommend, again, sitting down. I hope they sat down and listened to this and took notes. If you didn't, listen to it again, because Sammy dropped a lot of golden nuggets in terms of building and also what is to come and how to build for that future.
You know, Sammy was talking about extracting, revenue and fees on chain. I think we were extracting all the alpha we could out of Sammy this episode.
Yeah. Just to pat ourselves on our own back. I feel like we're getting better and better at like extracting things out of people.
Yeah. Definitely fun, and I'm excited to have him on again when that Dinero white paper drops.
Oh, dude, I cannot wait for that. We'll have the maximum FEV, the Flywheelpod extractable value.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to hear that, don't forget to hit that bell button on our YouTube and subscribe to us. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter @Flywheelpod, or join our Telegram group @Flywheelpod. Follow me on Twitter, DeFi Dave 22.
Follow me at 0xCapital_K.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.